you're in such a dark place that the vibration is so low that it's really hard to get out of.
Why is victimhood so dangerous?
Forgiveness is so powerful.
Anna, how did you let that go? Because that's the deepest pain that anyone can experience in their life.
It's because I love him.
Acting on emotions as guides to truth. Stillness. Surrendering to what is. Seeking. Using my gifts with purpose. Light. This is the emotional blueprint.
It was so clear to me. I kind of told you this already, but it was so clear to me that there was a lot of healing that has happened for you.
Yeah.
And I can tell when it's like authentic and when it's not, because some people want it to be true. They try to talk it into existence.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not deep and real. And I could tell after talking to you for like 2 minutes that like it was very deep and very real.
Yeah.
And I knew a little bit of what you had been through, and it's just it just felt, if you were open to it, it felt so like, it's just I think this is going to be a powerful message and story. And I think give people a lot of hope. That has been such a huge theme that we've been talking so much about on the podcast, is just like how many people just feel sad and kind of hopeless about things getting better for them, their financial situation getting better, their relationship status getting better, their emotional issues getting better, their career getting better. It's just like it permeates. It comes up almost every single day.
Yeah.
When I see clients, like sadness and how to find hope. And I know you felt so much sadness in your journey, and you're such a awesome example of hope, I believe. And so I'm just excited to kind of dive in, Miss Anna.
Yeah.
So you share whatever you feel comfortable with, but we would love to start hearing about your story and your journey and start talking about it a little bit.
Okay. I think where I want to start is kind of what brought me to the place of needing to go to Suncrest in the first place.
To go to therapy.
To therapy, yes. Because I had therapy. I mean, after my first divorce, before it was final, I had started going to the Rape Recovery Center. And I had an amazing therapist there. And she eventually went to one of the colleges over there, around the same place. And I saw her, like for a couple years, I think. But I started dating Adam, and, you know, the bliss of just being married, and he's awesome. Had my third child. And Gretel, she was a year and a half, I think is how old she was maybe she was just a year. And I was like, you know what? There's some stuff there. I had remembered a few of the instances, the men of abuse, and I had never forgotten some of those things. But it was really hard I came up to this place where it was really hard to be intimate. And I was like, okay, I need some serious help.
So you're just married, and
well, at that time we had been married, I think 6 years.
And then intimacy in your marriage, it started to become like more difficult or uncomfortable.
Yeah, because it wasn't any longer about conceiving children.
It was more about the bond,
right,
and the pleasure and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I decided to go. I had a friend who saw an EMDR therapist. And so I was like, okay, let's just check him out, you know. He's an amazing guy. His name's Shane. Is awesome. Awesome guy. Knows what he's doing. And so I went in. And with the EMDR, you kind of start out slow and you kind of do this. I think it's a 3-day before you really get into it.
And for those who don't know, EMDR is like a trauma therapy technique, basically, that's like pretty popular.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the 3rd day, we'd gotten into some really hard stuff. And I think it could have started somewhere else, but that's where it led me to was when I was little, 5, 6, I was killing animals. I was torturing and killing cats. And so that had been a really hard thing for me to know that I did, to come to grips that that's not the person I am. So why did I do that? So anyway, we did this EMDR session, and I went home, and for 10 days, I had the runs uncontrollably. I didn't even know when it was coming. I remember standing in my living room with my husband, just talking to him. And I just crapped my pants.
I just crapped my pants.
What did this dude do to me? And so I called him and I was like, I can't come see you anymore.
Talk about a release.
Look, like, this is my boundary, the runs. Like
dude,
this isn't.
I have no control over my bowels.
Sure.
What the heck is going on? And he told me, he said, oh, this is what happens when you have pretty severe trauma. And I was like, what? You know,
one of the things that can happen. There's many things that can happen physically.
Right.
So you basically, through this therapy, you went directly towards some of the trauma from your past childhood. And then your body started having these reactions.
Yeah, it was not happy. So that was in February of 2016. And around probably July, when I was 5. How old is your daughter?
5.
Yeah, 5. It was the summer and we were having a family reunion. My mom comes from a huge family. So there was probably 60 kids on the playground. And this homeless man, we were at Murray Park, comes up to me and he asks me for help. I'm 5. And he's a big burly guy, very unkempt. And I just looked at him and like, okay. So I took him he took me by the hand. We walked into the wooded area. And nobody knew I was missing. And so he sexually assaulted me. And I remember for 30 years, who found me? My mom had no idea I was gone. Nobody knew I was gone. And I remember hearing my cousin's voice. And she was like, I don't know, 12, 14 years older than I was. So she was 18. I remember hearing her voice calling my name. And he freaked out. And he's like, get out of here, get out of here. And so he starts pushing me away and getting really mad at me. And at 5, I'm like, oh no, what did I do? You know, like, how did I make him mad? And so I went out of this wooded area and I got onto the path and she found me. And so I had asked her multiple times, hey, Anita, do you remember finding me? Like maybe going to a family reunion like when you were younger? No, I never would have gone to a family reunion. So anyway, I get a message in February or in July, like around July, from Anita. And she's like, Anna, I remember it was me. I found you. And I was like, what? Here my whole life, I thought God hated me. How could God let this happen to a little girl?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And no, who was there? Nobody knew I was missing. Um, and so I had to talk with her about this. Anita, what made you come and find me?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, a voice told me to come and find you now. And she's like, so she told me exactly where she went. And I had gone back after we had talked, and I walked that area, and it was like at least 40 minutes. And so I had been gone at least 40 minutes to an hour, most likely. And, it was just like this amazing realization that not only did God forget about little Anna at 5 years old, thinking she could figure this out on her own, but he literally saved my life,
Yeah, who knows what could have happened?
Yeah. That kind of was, it was the thing that kind of started moving everything. It was the avalanche of things.
So this experience where, like, what impact did this have on you? That it was your sister, right? Your older sister?
No, it was a cousin.
Anita? A cousin.
A
Okay.
cousin that I didn't even know well at all.
Gotcha. So what impact did this have on you when you found out your cousin heard this voice and found you and kind of saved you in a way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what impact did that have on you when you found that out as an adult?
I mean, he had an immense impact on me. It showed me that, first of all, I'm an individual, and that God loves me so much that he either himself or would send an angel to go speak to the one person who probably would have listened. And it wasn't my mom, and it wasn't my sisters, it wasn't my dad. It was this 18-year-old girl. Up till then, I had no evidence that this even happened.
Because it started to come out from the trauma therapy that you were doing?
This came out, I had never forgotten this. I'd
okay.
never
Gotcha.
forgotten it.
Gotcha.
And I had told my mom about it. Nobody knew about it. And here, all I have is what happened. Hearing my cousin, who was like, no, I never would have gone to a family reunion, but I had all of these symptoms of, because I kind of went through it, like it kind of came back when I was around 14, is when I had to kind of deal with that again. And, I mean, I didn't have therapy. I didn't have any of this. I was a cutter when I was, 14. It's how I dealt with things. And I also had an eating disorder. It's the only way I could feel like I had control over whatever this was, and it wasn't like, oh, Mom, do you remember that one thing that happened? Oh, yeah. No, it was, did this even happen?
Right. It's just such a powerful part of your story so far, is this moment where your cousin has this impression. And so whether somebody believes in like God or the universe or intuition, like I think your story validates that there is a very real good influence that we can feel and tap into.
Yeah.
And if we've been talking a lot about stillness on the podcast. If we are still, I think your cousin was how old?
She was 18.
She was 18.
Mm-hmm.
I think the obvious message is like, you are not alone. And like something or someone is like watching out for you is a really cool message from your story so far. I just have to say so far, like, it's so cool how just willing and open you are just to share this. This is like, it's not easy. And I'm just really grateful for you so far. It's
Thank
cool.
you.
So,
Yeah.
so
Um,
that happened that with your cousin, and that kind of like opened up your kind of healing journey,
yeah.
basically, to start. What kind of happened next for you is on this journey for you?
A family member of mine, a distant family member, I had thought that this man was one of my abusers, and he didn't end up being one of my abusers. But it was like he's the only one that could have. And so, because at that time I had no idea my biggest abuser. And so I was talking to Anita. We became close. And we started talking, and I found out that this family member was in jail for assaulting his own patients who had come to him for help. And so I think all of
So
it,
he was he was a therapist or a doctor?
he was a physical therapist.
Okay.
So I think that it just started bringing stuff through. And I started not being able, going back to bad habits of
like memories
cutting.
started flooding back, and
Yeah.
pain and feelings.
And I started having these crazy dreams that were like stacked on top of each other. And I was like, what is this? I had no idea what it meant, because I was kind of in the middle of it. At that time, I was cutting really bad. I was self-harming really bad. And so my husband was just like, what on earth do I do? She's hurting herself. I don't know how to fix this, because men are fixers.
They are?
Yeah, they're fixers.
We are. It's a problem. It's a problem.
I know. It's good, but it's when women just want to talk.
It's good when women want to be fixed, which is like 2% of the time. So
that much? No, I'm just kidding. But
1.8.
Yeah. So he took me up to the uni, and they were like, "Do you want to kill yourself?" And I was like, "Well, no, not really. I just don't want to feel this anymore." And so they were like, "No, sorry, we can't take you." And so on the way home, I was like, I just got turned down by uni. I wasn't like, what is going on, And so I talked with my bishop, who actually just had like a leadership meeting of some sort. What is her name? Cammie. She used to work at Suncrest with the red hair.
At the therapy office. Okay.
Yes. And so she's in my stake. And so she put on this meeting.
Like your church. She's at your church.
Right. Yeah. And so she did this meeting with my bishop. My bishop got a hold of me and was like, "Hey, Cammie's at Suncrest. Why don't you check out Suncrest?" So I went there, talked to Rod, and just started.
So what's unique about Suncrest is it's a therapy office with a bunch of therapists, and they have like a program that they call an outpatient program. So you go to therapy you don't just go to therapy once a week. You go every single day for like 5 to 8 hours.
8 hours.
8 hours.
I was there 8 hours.
And it was mostly one-on-one sessions mixed in with some groups. So it's like long therapy days of like talking and like looking at all your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you got rejected from the hospital because you weren't suicidal. So you went to this therapy. Okay.
At that time, my Gretel, she was 1.5. I started there in September of 2016. And Lincoln, 2 years older than that, and Noli, 5.5. In order for me to do this, I had to give my kids, I had to split them up for a year almost. My mom took the youngest two, and she lived up in Syracuse. She lives up in Syracuse. And Adam's mom, who is a elementary school teacher, took Noli, who was a first kindergartner at that time. It was so hard. because, all I wanted to be my whole life was a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I was totally failing as a mom. And so Adam and I had decided that this is what we had to do. The kids were in safe hands, but I got to see them on the weekends, was it. And
That's so tough.
oh,
That's so tough as a mom, as a parent.
mhm.
And how many people just don't end up making that decision to focus on like their own emotional or spiritual healing or whatever because they have kids.
Yeah,
A lot.
a
And
lot.
so it's a big sacrifice.
Yeah. It was,
You had to give up your family in a way.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
You had to choose like my own healing or my family, basically.
Yeah.
And that might be an extreme way to look at it, but it's really tough.
But it is. And a lot of the times, if you don't choose yourself in that situation, you end up raising them in severe dysfunction.
Well, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I think what I've noticed, just a thought on that real quick is like, I actually think there's some parents, well, I wouldn't say most parents, but a lot of parents actually spend too much time with their kids. And the reason why I'm saying that is because they don't focus enough on filling what they need. Like they don't have a spiritual practice. They don't have like personal time to like maybe deal with their emotions or maybe, learn more about what they need to do to improve. Like, and it's interesting to think like me spending time with my family can actually be the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Me and my wife have 3 kids, and it's like when we have 3 hours in the evening, what has been so valuable for us is like, okay, I'll take the kids and you have an hour just to have some time to do some fulfilling things for you.
Yeah.
Like take a bath and whatever. And then I'll take an hour and you watch the kids, and then we'll spend 1 hour like all together and we'll eat dinner and like whatever. And that, what I've noticed is that hour when we split it is way more quality than instead of us spending 3 hours all together and like we're kind of off a little bit and like, I don't know, just not very balanced.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty good rule of thumb for most people, this like kind of 1-1-1 rule when you have time. But you're it takes, why was that? Well, I think it's kind of obvious, but it just takes so much courage to choose you over your kids.
Well, and I think that you don't see it like that at that time, and you're also so confused at what in the world is even going on. How did I get here?
It's like, look, the runs are happening. Like we have no choice.
Do we have multiple bathrooms?
We're not
here?
even talking about emotional or it was just the runs. We got to get this figured out.
Yeah. But I also think that, as you were saying, it's so important for little kids to see mom take time.
Yes.
That she is actually an individual person.
Totally.
And she's not just, I have a 14-year-old and she is awesome, but she makes me her slave.
She makes me her slave. Yeah.
She'll be like, Mom, get me this. Mom, can you give me? I'll be like, you're right there. Can't you just? No, I need mom to do it, And so
standard teenager.
Totally standard. But it's good for them to know that mom and dad, that they have their life, that, they're still living. We are not living necessarily for you, although you are a huge part of why we're living. But it's just real. It's good for kids to see that.
There's this really cool scripture in the Bible, and it says something like, "He that chooses mother or father over me is not of me." So I
Yes.
think Christ is saying this. So Christ says, "He that chooses their family over me is not of me."
Right.
And so if you believe that's literal about Christ, if you believe that, that's great. But an extension of Christ is also us. So if we consistently choose other people before what we need, that leads to a path of disconnection and darkness, basically.
Right. Being a people
Disconnection and
pleaser.
100%. So I think the fear really gets to a lot of parents in this situation because they're like, I don't know how long this is going to take. Like, it could be a year, it could be 5. Like, and my daughter's 1, Gretel's 1.5, and my other kids are however old. Like, but it's so cool where you're at now, where you fast forward 7 years, and it's like, wow, like I'm in this. I think you feel this way, like, wow, like that, me taking that time, maybe not necessarily Suncrest, but just the time that you have taken is like so worth it, because now I can be fully like available.
Yes. And I
have all these like powerful life lessons that I can.
Yeah, I'm not even the same person to my kids. So anyway, I went to Suncrest. I've never felt that exhaustion before, like that kind of exhaustion. It was intense and insane, and I'm surrounded by people who were cutting themselves in class, who were pretending to pass out. There was, just the amount,
just the gamut, the full range.
Victim mode was in.
Was that
high gear?
At least a 9. Yeah.
Dang. And so, but it was good. I loved groups. Group therapy is one of my favorite therapies. Learned a lot. That's when I started doing art because of you.
So that's how we met. So I used to work at Suncrest, and we met, was it 9 years ago?
It was
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
And I knew you for a little bit there, and then we bumped into each other 7 years later, and then we're doing this podcast. So that's cool.
Yep. So, anyway, Suncrest I had been there for 2 months, I think. And one of the most awesome things about me, and the things that I've had to deal with, is this mother figure wound.
Yeah. And like the attachment,
yes. And so, I had talked about this mother figure wound before with my previous therapist at the Rape Recovery Center. In fact, there was a point that I thought, maybe I'm attracted to women, And this specific therapist, she was married to a woman, and she very quickly told me, no, that's not what this is. And I was so grateful for that, because I think that our thoughts can really take us down to areas where we don't understand what's really going on inside, that seem like, oh, well, that must be it. I must be that. And so I was so grateful to her for that. Although the mother wound continually got worse and worse and worse. I had this. At age 3, I remember making the conscious choice that I needed to find a new mom.
Yeah, so let's talk about this for a second. So the whole like mother wound, parent wound is a very like kind of therapy like term that a lot of people maybe don't know what it is, or haven't heard of it. What is a parent wound, and how did that develop for you with your mom?
So my mom the most beautiful woman I know. Literally, she is an angel living on earth. Was in a circumstance with my father that was not good. I'm not going to go too deep into all of this because it's ripped my family apart once.
Sure.
But my mom was not able to be there. I don't know if you've ever been in a abusive relationship with a spouse. You just kind of zombie out. You kind of have to.
You're talking about your first marriage, or are you talking about your mom?
Well, I had to do that, but my mom was
in
in
an
this
abusive relationship.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so
yeah, you're in survival mode.
Oh.
So you're having a lot of
and so you can't give what your kids need to them.
Because you have to just manage the crazy fear and the craziness of it.
10 of 11 kids. So
wow. You're
quite
definitely from Utah.
Yes.
That is insane.
10 of 11 kids. So, there's a lot of dynamics going on there. But it wasn't that my mom was abusive. It was that I was being abused and she couldn't see it.
Right. You were being abused and she couldn't see it. Because do you believe this? Because you would be the expert on this, not me. That when a child is getting abused or when someone is going through something really difficult or abusive, there's always signs.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're really connected as a parent to your child, like you will know.
Yeah.
That's something. So she wasn't able to be connected to you to see it. That's a great way to say it.
Right. But she couldn't even be connected to herself.
Exactly. And that's why she couldn't be connected to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So that starts to create a wound.
Oh, it was.
Because I need this, even if you didn't go through abuse, even if you had no abusive history in your upbringing, like you still need a mom that is going to be like nurturing and available.
Right.
And if we don't have that, then we enter adulthood with a parent wound.
Right. My story is so complex, which is why it makes it so difficult. But I was diagnosed with a dissociative disorder, close to dissociative identity disorder, but more along.
As a child?
No.
Or are you talking about as an adult?
As an adult.
Okay.
As an adult.
Kind of makes sense and is kind of obvious.
And so, you find out, I have so much research on this, right? You find out that this happens to people between the ages of 0 and 7.
Yep.
And it happens because there's nowhere to turn.
We should talk about that for a second. Well, actually, go ahead. If it comes back, I'll share it.
So with that, I had this mother wound. And since I was 3, I made that choice. I need to find a mom who can protect me.
At 3 years old.
3. I remember
that is pretty
barely sunbeam.
Unreal.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted my sunbeam teacher to be my mom. I wanted to
one
go
of your
home
church,
with her.
One of your church teachers.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. I definitely want to come back to that because, maybe just a thought on that real quick is most people do not become aware of what they're needing from their parents. Sometimes never. And sometimes they don't even become aware of it as an adult.
Right.
But typically what's normal is later teen years.
Mm-hmm.
And then for some people that are more perceptive, which is usually women or girls at like 11, 12, 13. So you were 3 years old and you knew.
Yeah. It's like I'm right there right now. It's that vivid in my brain.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So what gifts does someone need to have to be aware of that at 3 years old?
Right. I think I have a lot of
we can come back to that
spiritual gifts, but
go ahead.
Okay, so Anyway, I go into Suncrest with this mother wound. And I mean, I had mother after mother after you know, my first grade teacher, my third grade teacher, you know, and it was like they were there and then they weren't. So it was almost like this abandonment.
So is it like, okay, I never got what I needed from my own mother, and so I'm like trying to employ these
Yes.
women to be the mom that I never had.
Yeah, save me.
Yeah.
Save me. And through a lot of this time in elementary, it was still going on. And so I think I literally was trying to find someone to save me. I remember I told my third grade teacher about it. And she literally sat me in the wet room as an example of talking naughty. Can you imagine? That would never happen now. But
The wet
good old
room?
80s. Yeah. Remember how they had a wet room that kind of had tile floor and,
Oh, okay.
you know, where you do like,
Okay.
they have the drinking fountains and stuff
Oh,
in there.
gotcha.
Yeah. And it was just like, I mean, I was humiliated
The
because I
wet room.
finally had told somebody about it and I was the one in trouble. And so, you know, at that young of an age, you learn, okay, I cannot tell anybody about this. So, going back let's go back to Suncrest. So, a month and a half into Suncrest, and it's crazy how this happens. And I have thoughts on why this happens, but I remember when I was in 6th to 7th grade. So it was over the summer, and I went to Oakcrest, which is a girls' camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting in the very back. I mean, there's hundreds of people in front of me, and there's like, you know, at least 30 to 50 Oakcrest counselors that are doing their little thing. And, you know, welcoming us all there to this camp. My mind saw this person, this woman, that's her. I've done that so many times. I don't even think about it. It's almost as if
It's almost like automatic.
Mm-hmm. And it's the person. That is the person. And
Interesting.
So at Suncrest,
So it's like a laser focused. So we call that like an emotional draw. Like it's like, I love the way you said it. There's no thoughts going on. I'm not like, oh, I wonder if she could be like the mom that I never had. No, it's just like, boom.
Yep, it's there.
So just one quick thought on that. This is a very, very real thing that happens. A very real thing that happens to so many people in relationships.
Oh yeah.
Dating relationships. And because if you've had a disconnect, this is more common with the opposite sex parent. So for me, my mom, you, your dad,
right.
Dane, his mom. If there's an emotional disconnect with the opposite sex parent, then we enter adulthood with this parent wound, depending on who it is. And this kind of like this emotional draw is very real and almost automatic. Mm-hmm. It's not you. And so why am I saying this? Well, because people misperceive that as like, this is a destiny or love at first sight, or there's like a chemistry or a, what do people say? Just like an unspoken, like it's just her. Like I just know it. And it's like,
no,
that's often, I wouldn't say always, because I think, you know, but it's often coming from an unhealthy place.
Yes, absolutely.
So you described that so well that so many people experience, but they're just not aware of.
Yeah. Therapist once tell me, you're actually very lucky that this doesn't happen to you with
men.
Like a men.
Well, yeah, because you're like pretty, and there's potentially so much more pain.
Oh,
and like
divorce, marriage, divorce.
The abuse cycle would would have been just obviously continuous.
Right. And, you know, because of the way that I am, I think that this really goes to the core of who I am. I'm very loving. I'm very nurturing. And I think that that is why me not getting that, instead of the abuse ripping me apart, it was not getting this. And I think that's why it was so devastating, was because that's who I am. I am like a ball of love, man. And
I believe you.
it's ridiculous sometimes, actually.
I know you are. I know you are.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to Suncrest, this happened with one of the therapists there.
This emotional draw.
Right.
I
found my new mom. Man, she was going to make it all better. I was finally going to get someone who could hear me and what I've been through and nurture that wound, you know, and fight for me, man. Just fight.
Protect me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, about a month and a half after she, in my eyes, became this, she had quite the trauma herself. And
this is your therapist.
This is my therapist.
At the time. Okay.
Yep. And she was not on my schedule, which is at that point was extremely difficult, because any kind of change in any kind of thing, it's like death, right?
They don't care about me.
Right.
Well, whatever pain is there, which is a pretty decent bruise.
Yeah.
It was all coming up.
Oh, yeah.
When?
So anyway, I emailed this person, and she had come out and grabbed me. She said, "Come to my office." And she sobbed and sobbed and sobbed.
This is your therapist at the time.
Yep. And her spouse had found out that she was having an affair. Emotional affair. I have no idea what kind, but an affair. And she told me
your
that
therapist did this.
She's laying on the couch. I'm kneeling next to her. And I am trying to figure out how to save her. This is my mom, right? This is my mom.
Right.
And she told me in sessions after this, I was there for hours, a couple of hours, and watching her cry. She couldn't go home. Her kids didn't want to have anything to do with her. You know, this had blown up. And I became her therapist for many, many months after that.
You were paying to see her.
Yes.
And and you were her therapist, and you were paying for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That blows my mind.
Yeah. And I kept it a secret. I knew it should be a secret, but this was our secret. And so, she would say to me things like,
I hope she's not practicing anymore.
Yeah.
That's maybe off podcast conversation.
Yeah. But she would say to me, "I am so grateful. You have no idea. I need you more than you need me." And so months of this kind of, and we became very close.
Sure.
But there was something inside of me that was like, wait a minute. She is not seeing you. Your mom is forgetting
being
about
selfish.
You. She is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It was kind of that, like it's kind of an abandonment, but she knew she was doing wrong. And so she started pulling back. And one thing that someone who's been through a lot of trauma is they can feel, unlike most people can feel. They know when something's wrong.
There's a hypersensitivity to something being wrong in the relationship.
Right. And so I became pretty suicidal. I sent her, I remember I sent her email once, and this was months after all of this had just been, going on. I mean, I saw videos of her and this guy literally fighting. She was in her robe. She was, and that's very intimate. And I don't know why she would show me these things, but I think she really did need me as much as I needed her. But it should never have been that way.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And so one day I get a phone call from the higher ups.
So you got a message from the higher ups that you can't see
Right.
this therapist anymore.
Right.
And you were probably
And I was like, what? What is going on? I was so upset. They put together this little meeting. This is why. And they said, we became too close. And they literally blamed it on me. They had no idea. And at that point, I was I didn't want to out this person.
Yeah.
I'm still protecting her. But there was no protection for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, I had become too difficult.
Once again, there was no protection.
Exactly.
For you.
Right. No protection. And here I had Rod against me. I had all the higher ups. I was this difficult person. No, the person who's been here for a year and a half, who literally cut herself during class. No, that's not the difficult person. It's the person who I used to bring gifts to the other clients, to the therapist. I just wanted to find love and joy where I had to be 8 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And yet this happened. I'm in this meeting. They would not allow me to go get my stuff from this person's office. I couldn't go get anything. And I wasn't allowed to talk to this person. I wasn't allowed near this person's office. Like, all of a sudden I'm dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
When the last 10 months, 9 months probably plus, I'm the one. Had I said something, but I think what happened is that I became the liability. At that point,
Sure.
They had covered this person up so much that, they had to have known. They had to have known. And they had covered this person up so much that there's no way that I probably couldn't have come in there and slapped a lawsuit or something on somebody, So anyway, it was one of the lowest places up to that point that I had ever been. I had decided that I was going to die. I know I laugh, but it
was very real.
It was very real back then.
Yeah.
But I starved myself to 82 pounds because I wanted to be in the hospital and I wanted this person to know what they did.
You wanted to send a message.
Right. When I was already there to get help for the things and at this time, I had things coming. Like, I saw Christy for my dreams, and she was amazing. And she was able to really help me understand, what specific things mean. Like, depths of water means repressed memories. Basements mean repressed memory. Just all of these things.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she really is. And so I was really able to start understanding this set of dreams that I started having, or that I had been having for a while. And they were disturbing, and it was the weirdest things that tied my family in. And the very last one that I had, I wouldn't allow myself, even in my dream, to see this person, to see his face. And the very last one that I had, I knew without a doubt that it was my dad.
Who was abusive to you when you were growing up.
Right. And so
Wow.
in my dream, I came down to the basement. We had an old New Yorker, and he was laying on it. And I saw this little teeny girl, and it was me. And she was laying from his feet to about his waist. And she was completely zombied out. And I knew in that moment, I knew that all the things that I was experiencing, my body was experiencing, all of the things that, the nightmares and it just didn't cease. When I went to bed, it was sometimes worse than when I was awake. And I ran up the stairs and the ground, I couldn't move. And I'm trying to run away. And after that happened, I got this excruciating pain in my foot, at the very bottom of my foot, right here. And like I was walking on glass. And then it spread to my other one. So this was in 2017, in April of 2017. And I had no idea. I went to the beach for the first time in 2017. I went to California. We went to the beach with Adam's family, and I could not walk on the sand without just being in so much pain.
Mm.
And I still have CRPS. It took me years to find out what it was, because for most people, they have some kind of injury. I never had an injury, a physical one.
Right.
But I had this gaping emotional, spiritual wound. And it showed up in my body in a very physical manner that I could not ignore. Because you need your feet. I had little kids that I had to run after. Gretel was 4.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
When this was really bad. And she would throw fits because she didn't get what she wanted. Other people had to take her to the car for me because I could not literally carry her and walk. My feet were in so much pain.
It's like your body's way of reminding itself, like the emotional pain is like still there.
Yeah.
It's still there.
And
With every step.
Yes. And it's
So
also that
powerful.
it was like, I didn't want to keep walking into that. And so it was this reminder of, am I willing to keep going like this? Like, it was so hard. I'd go to the temple. At that time, I was going to the temple. And I'll tell you about when I started doing that. But I'd walk on that beautiful carpet and it was so painful. And I'm like, oh, come on. Jesus, throw me a bone, man. This is so painful. And I did not want this. I didn't go out and do something fun and hurt myself, or I didn't go out and kick something and, hurt myself doing that. This was pure trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so it spread to my left one. And you have to remember our bodies, right? My right side is my male side.
Mm-hmm.
My left side is my feminine side.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it started in my male side because of that issue.
That makes sense, actually.
And so it at one point
because the right brain is more of the emotional, creative, emotional, and then that manifests on the left side of your body, which is feminine. Left brain more to the doer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more masculine, and then that is right side of the body. That's really cool.
Yeah. And so at one point it was in my hands as well, and I had to drive with my fingertips. I learned to drive with both of my feet. I still drive with both of my feet in my automatic car. But it was like this. I was going through all of this stuff. And then after I had found out that, was I remember in group going, geez, I mean, my dad was not, he was very physically abusive, mentally, emotionally. It was a hard home to grow up in. But, I was like, dude, at least these guys' dads were freaking crazy. And so when this started showing up for me, it was really hard. And I didn't want to accept it at all. I went through the whole I'm a liar. I think that's a big thing with people who store things and then it comes out later in their life.
Like, am I just making this up?
Right.
Like, is this real?
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult.
It is so difficult. And then it really broke my family. And I still have siblings that won't talk to me. And this was in 2018. I had tried to take my life twice in 2018.
Some very real low points that are these huge extremes that most people have not experienced in their life. Some people might have, but this like difficult low point of finding out that not only was I abused by a homeless man in the woods and my cousin saved my life, but that I was sexually abused by my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was not able to protect me. And one of the things that I'm sure that, maybe some people don't, is that I guess I'll just share this from my clinical as a therapist experience is like, I've seen a lot of people that have been through really horrific and difficult things in their life, like things that I could never even imagine before I got into this profession. And out of all the things that I've noticed, the most difficult and the most traumatic thing that I've ever witnessed that someone has experienced is getting sexually or physically abused by their parent.
Yeah.
Out of that, like, I'm so vulnerable as a kid. I need this love and I need this support, but instead I get abuse.
Yeah.
That there's nothing deeper. There's no deeper trauma than what you have experienced. So we're going to talk more about I want you to keep sharing your story in whatever way you want to, but at some point we're going to start talking about like where you're at now and this beautiful transformation that happened for you. But I just want to say that, like, for those listening, like, if this can happen for you, there's nothing. And the other thing about you is you were born this way. As like, I kind of mentioned this as a 3-year-old, you're very aware. You have this like sensitivity. You're an emotional and sensitive like human. You were just born that way. Mm-hmm. And you also happen to have one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a human being take place.
Yeah.
And so you have these low points of you're finding out about your dad. You have this low point of feeling like being abandoned by your therapist and like her turning you into a client.
Yeah.
Which is just nuts to me. But there's some bad therapists out there. That's for sure. And there's a lot of mediocre. We'll talk about this another time, but like, yeah, I believe like 1 out of 5 therapists is like a really good therapist.
I think that it's because therapists go into therapy to fix themselves. A lot of them do.
A lot of them do.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of them do.
And I don't think that they necessarily go like they don't know that they're doing that.
Like it's unconscious.
Yes. And I think we can talk about the law of attraction and how I think I attracted a lot of this to myself. But I also think that this was...
yeah, you didn't. Like you were talking about, your pain did.
Right.
Like your pain.
Right.
And that didn't come from you. That came from your dad.
Mm-hmm.
and your mom.
Yeah, in 2018, that is the year that everything changed. So the second time that I was going to take my life, I had gone to one of the old houses, kind of where the abuse had started for me, like the really bad stuff. And I had
And why did you go there? As a way to like revisit
kind of,
the pain?
like, this is the reason I cannot, because at
So
that
it's kind of
time,
like the shack.
right. And I had just talked to my dad, and he told me that I was crazy, basically.
Like
You know,
I
like,
didn't do any of
no,
that. Like
I didn't do
deny.
any of that.
Yeah.
And so here I am trying to figure out, like, dang, am I a liar? Or why am I thinking of these things if it's never, why am I dreaming of these things? Why are these things coming up? Why are these memories if they never were memories, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And both times that I had talked to him was the times that I ended up trying to, because
To
I
kill
wanted,
yourself.
yes,
Because
I wanted to know truth.
Yep.
I didn't want to live in this weird, am I a liar life? Because that is exactly opposite of who I am
Man, that's
and
so
what
hard.
I want.
That's so hard.
Yeah. And so it was, at that point I had to stop talking to him.
For sure.
Because that time it was actually a miracle. My husband found me there. He's like, there were two places I thought you would be, and it was either house. And he came right before. It was quite the doozy. We were fighting over the pills, and in this old abandoned house. And
It was quite the doozy.
it was awful. My poor husband. He's an amazing man to have gone through this. You know, Shay used to tell me most people's
Who's
marriages.
Shay?
Shay was my EMDR therapist.
One of your other therapists. Okay.
Yeah. Would tell me most people with your kind of trauma never stay married. Never. And so
yep.
Yeah.
Because it's so gnarly, like we talked about.
It's just so complex,
Mhm.
you know? And so he had brought my 3 children. And my middle child is an empath, and he is amazing. And he came over to me as I'm in the weeds. I was wearing a dress in the weeds, and he put his hands like this right on top of my head. And he said, "Mom, please come home." As he watches the ambulance, the police, the fire truck show up and take me away.
So I missed this part. Who is it that put their hands on your head?
My little boy.
Your son.
My son.
Wow.
And at that time, oh man, I had 8.
He says, "Mom, please come home."
Yeah. And he's crying.
Another one of those like kind of divine
Oh yeah.
moments.
Yeah. It was nothing. First of all, nothing moves you like pain. Second of all, nothing moves you like your child's pain. And
Right.
I spent 8 hours at the hospital in Draper. Literally, they put me in a room that was a quarter of this size. It felt like a closet. No windows. I was in there for 8 hours thinking about what I had just done. When you have trauma, I think we talked about this a little bit, but when you have trauma, where does that trauma come from?
You asking me?
Yeah. Where does it come from?
Where does your trauma come from?
Mhm.
It comes from your pain that is not resolved from your past.
Right. And it does. When trauma happens, I would even say it's mostly spiritual. I mean, there's also obviously a physical factor to that. We're surrounded by dark and we're surrounded by light, right? God does not create trauma. It comes from the adversary.
Comes from darkness.
It comes from very low vibration.
Yep.
And so, and I'll get more into this when we talk about, because you had asked me what has made me heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you I stopped therapy. And you're like, oh, we need to talk about this. But at that time,
Well, let's talk about that just for a second, because
Okay.
I think that's really powerful what you're saying. And I think that's a really good message. So there's one of my favorite sayings in the last month is, when there is no enemy within, the enemy outside of us can do us no harm.
Right.
And so what is the enemy within? Well, the enemy within can be two things. It can be past pain that is stored in our body,
Mm-hmm.
past trauma, like you said. And then it can also be thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if we could actually see what's going on when we have trauma come up, that's okay. It actually is your body's way of trying to nudge you
Mm-hmm.
to let go of it. Because if you don't, if you avoid that trauma, then that darkness feasts
Oh, it does.
upon it.
It does.
And it can take on not only, I've seen this a lot from people, not only is that pain still pain, but it starts to turn into, it gains momentum. It gains kind of a darkness.
Right.
And so the importance of like avoidance is darkness, and confronting and going towards something
Mm-hmm.
is light.
Right.
If it's something good, obviously, if it's like, but when we're talking about pain, avoiding pain brings more darkness into our life. Confronting it can begin to bring in more light. Now, what's crazy about your experience is very common, is that you started to confront your pain, and you started to have diarrhea.
Oh, yeah.
And things got worse.
Yeah.
Things started getting, quote, way worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why, and people kind of intellectually know this, like that's why they're afraid of it. Like, I can't start looking at this because things are going to start getting worse in my life. Right. So I'm not going to touch this stuff.
Right.
But it reminds me of what we've been talking about on the podcast previous. Like, in order for a tree to grow taller, so the saying is, in order for a tree to reach heaven, its roots have to grow closer to hell.
Right.
So
it's the dark nights of the soul.
We have to, yes. So we have, like, the answer is like, the truth is like, things definitely in your experience, and your experience is obviously very extreme as far as the depth of pain, like we've been talking about. But it is somewhat true. Like, if we start confronting it, things do get shaken up.
Oh, they do. Absolutely.
But long term, we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
Our message is going to be that it's so worth it.
Oh, it is so worth it. And I know for me that, and I think that because, I believe in God, God knows that if he wants to move me, he's going to have someone abandon me. It's just the way it is. And, we have so much power. What is our superpower? Because our superpower is in our pain. But there's no way you can find out what your superpower is unless you go and you dig through that pain.
What do you mean by that? I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by your superpower is in your pain?
The greatest people who have overcome, those are the greatest people, the people who can overcome. But what did they overcome? They overcame something seriously awful or painful. And you listen to them, and sometimes it feels like their superpower. Like they can speak and it's superpower, right? because they
power.
know.
There's power behind their words.
Oh, yeah.
Because
But, whether it's to be when I was a kid, I wanted to be an educational child psychologist. Literally, that's what I always wanted to be.
whatever that is. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
know.
I'm just kidding.
Because I wanted to help kids, and I believe that the very best therapists are people who have been, whether or not it's at the same area that I've been,
Mhm.
in my deepest hell, you know, they have their own deepest hell. As an empath or as a someone who can just, it's not even compassion. What's the other word? It's depth of empathy.
Mhm.
You can empathize with someone, and that is a power. It really is, to be able to feel the feelings that someone I'm sitting across from is saying. That's a superpower.
What's the greatest superpower or gift that you have noticed that has come from your pain?
I think that my greatest superpower is a spiritual one. I believe that because of what I've been through, I can see and feel darkness and choose out. I didn't used to have that superpower.
That's pretty cool.
Um,
Goes back to kind of the tree visual of like if you wanted to be a better mom and if you wanted to be better for yourself and for your family, it's like you had to grow those roots deeper into the
Oh, yeah.
darkness.
Yeah.
And now you are able to, I guess we're kind of talking about discernment, being able to
Yeah.
see and be more sensitive to darkness and choose light. And what's cool about any gift we developed from pain is it's not just for us.
No.
Or we're meant to use that to help other people. And so cool.
Yeah.
I can see that in you. You have, it's very obvious for me when you talk about some of what you've been through and some of the gifts that have come is you also have like the gift of vision. Like you can see things that other people can't see. And people probably have said this to you, like, how do you know this about me? Like, I haven't been really telling you, how do you like know this? Or how do you, I've only shared a little bit with you and what you say, like, I don't know if you've had that experience, but if you haven't, and you start using this, you're going to see things in other people deeply that they cannot see themselves.
Yeah.
And that comes from a place of compassion, because if you can do something that's going to help someone suffer less than you did, it's going to be impossible for you not to do it.
Yeah. And, I truly thought with all my heart that I would be in therapy for the rest of my life. I mean, I was ready to pay that, $12,000
whatever
insurance cover it, for the rest of my life. And for me, God had something different for me. And he really sped up the pace because he knew where to hit me. And I don't want to say he hit me, but he knew the things that affect me the very most, that push me like crazy.
Like you said,
move.
your own pain, you seeing the pain in your kids,
Yes.
you're walking
through my physical pain, dude, that stepped everything up. And
as it does for most people.
Oh,
That makes sense.
Okay, so going back to 2018, things were so bad that I was like, "Okay, there's got to be. I can't do this anymore." Obviously, my therapist just can't do this either. I had the craziest thing happen when I had to look for another place. So, and I went into another full-time facility.
So another therapy place.
At Pathways. So I go and I meet with this lady, Michelle. She was at Pathways. She's the owner, amazing woman. The most incredibly intelligent woman I have ever met. Beautiful, powerful. She'd just be so proud of me right now. But she took me on. She knew some of my diagnosis. And so she knew that none of her therapists could work with me. And so she decided to work with me on her own. And oh my gosh, I learned so much there. Amazing things, amazing things. But at this time, I had decided I was going to go to my temple 3 times a week. And I did that for almost a year, 3 times a week. And it changed my life. I mean, they did equine therapy. They did all of these things that were different, and just I had never done before. I was kicked by a horse. I was just like so many crazy things that taught me, wow, But I remember Michelle. Michelle told me once, she said, Anna, you have a gift. She said, you are a mirror. You are a mirror for people to see who they are. You will reflect to them who they are. And she said, people are going to love you and people are going to hate you. And it has nothing to do with you. This is all because what they see reflects upon you.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it was so amazing. And I think it was the first time that it was like, whoa, you're telling me that I have a gift? It was like, she was so positive.
So that was one thing that, like, just someone telling you, just someone seeing you.
Yes.
So the one thing that you needed from your mom that you didn't get was to be seen.
Right.
And you start to be seen by this therapist who's not judging you.
No. And she would not let me live in my victimhood. And we'll talk about victimhood. But she wouldn't let me live there. I remember one time I was with her and we were doing a therapy session and we were talking, I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I had one of my parts that kind of fronted. And she goes, is this Anne? And because that was what her name was. And Anne said yes. And she said, okay, Anna, I need you to come and take charge. And at that point, it was like, anything you'd ever seen about DID, it was therapists would literally ask you to go into those parts and speak from them, right?
So let's just give a context on that. So for people who have no idea what you're saying. So like these parts basically represent parts of your pain from your past. So if you have trauma, it's not uncommon to have like this pain show up as like maybe like a slightly different personality or the angry version of you or the sad version of you or the younger version of you.
Right.
So, and so it's like,
and what it is it really is just a split off of brain memory, of memories in your brain that have protected themselves from being seen, I think.
Yeah.
Because it really is not. And you can have different tones, different personality, all of that does come with it. But I truly believe that comes from a lower vibration I don't think that that ever is your true self ever,
Well, for sure it's not. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so anyway, she showed me, she was like, oh, you have the authority. You have the power. Are you kidding me? Like, and I think up to that point, it was nobody had ever said that to me before.
So she started to see you, and then she started to instill some confidence in you. Like, you have
Oh yeah, you
some
have power.
power, you have some control. Like, yeah, you don't need uh these other women or whatever.
No,
Um,
no. And in fact, she would tell me, don't, I am not your mom. You are not going to attach to me like that. This is, it was very upfront. It was very, I mean, she was brilliant at what she did. She did it for 30 years. And sadly, she had trauma of her own. And that's why I say superpower. This woman was powerful. And she literally changed my life in the way that I thought. And
cool.
she ended up taking her own life because she did not ever address her own. She continually helped so many women, drugs, suicide, all
Wow.
sorts of things. And about a year and a half ago, she took her life.
She knew how to help other people,
Mhm.
but she didn't know how to help herself.
Yep. Yeah. And I had talked to her probably 4 weeks before that happened. It was pretty devastating. And so I went to a group therapy up at Pathways after that had happened. These girls and guys, they were just torn, ripped apart. If she can't even why should we? They're still in that. And coming from a place of whole, it was so hard to watch, but I was so grateful that I could be on the other side and give comfort, where I could. But, whether you're 30 or 80, it doesn't matter the age. You can still struggle with so many things. I mean, she had kids that she left, the business too, but she was amazing woman.
There's so much more to talk about as far as like the crazy downs that you went through. I'm like dying to know about what were some of the key moments that really led to you this like transformation and rebirth and you beginning to like heal from all this pain, because it was coming out in your body. It was like there's triggers happening. You were feeling abandoned by women. So like what started to happen? What were some of the key moments?
Well, I think that the downs are the key moments for me. I mean, that's
powerful.
But that's how I learn, And so I think it was having the down and then choosing. It's that choice, right? It's me going, I want better. I need better. I'm going to try something different. And, I did ketamine treatments. I did energy work. I did breath work. Amazing.
You tried everything.
Oh, yeah. I've done everything. And, in each of those things, I learned something.
You kind of committed that. It sounds like from what you're saying, it's like when the triggers or the pain came up, you kind of committed yourself to be a student.
Yeah. And
to really try to learn from what you were feeling.
Yeah.
And at what point was there a point in this emotional healing process where you had to choose to feel the pain?
Where I had to choose to feel the pain?
Mm-hmm. Something that I've definitely seen and that we've talked a lot about is often, and it might not be as structured as what I'm saying it, everyone's path is different, but there always seems to be this turning point I notice with people when when it's voluntary, they choose to go toward their problem. They're not running away from it. They choose to go toward the pain and feeling it. It seems to be one of those universal parts of how to begin to like heal and let go. And so I'm so intrigued. I'm really curious about that for you.
I think that it was when I finally, because for so long, I didn't want to face that was the reality, that was the relationship between me and my dad. And so I think that when I finally said, okay, you know what? I'm not going to fight this anymore. And it is what it is. And, he had his own set of traumatic events, I'm sure, that happened in his life. I don't know what they are. His life was very hard because he lived his life as a victim.
Hmm.
And he chose that. And he never chose out of it.
I think that's what I think that's exactly kind of what we're both saying. We're kind of saying the same thing is like, so there's a series of many choices.
Yeah.
That you had to make to not avoid it and to address it. And your dad, as an example, when people don't choose to face their problems, naturally what happens is they begin to blame other people for their problems.
Right.
Which is, you just mentioned, is a really dark cycle.
It is very dark. It is. And, I lived that. I lived that life. And, there was a time when being a victim, it felt good. I was getting love. I was getting, attention, approval.
Yeah.
People were telling me, oh my gosh, you've been through so many. Oh, you poor thing. But I think that when I quit therapy, I also at the very same time lost my very best friend of many years who had gone through all of this with me. She didn't die. Honestly, I think that had God allowed me that relationship, I think I would have stayed a victim.
Wow.
Especially coming from, large family, child abuse, the attention of, oh my gosh, you've been through so much, finally, after, you had already been through it and you're so alone. But the thing is it's not sustaining. It's never sustaining.
Being a victim.
Yeah. And
right, because you're just getting temporary. It's like an addiction.
No, it is an addiction.
It is an addiction.
It is an addiction.
Because you're getting these temporary hits
of dopamine,
of love and approval and whatever. Yep.
It is literally it's dopamine.
Like a drug.
It is.
Yep.
And, it's also this vicious cycle because you're in such a dark place that the vibration is so low that it's really hard to get out of.
Well, you start to believe, it starts to become a deception, a very mass deception of, so why is victimhood so dangerous? And maybe we should define victimhood. It's when we have pain or negative emotions come up. I wouldn't say pain. It's when we have negative emotions come up and we constantly want to put that on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a great example. Because the truth is so much of all of your pain, most of your pain, if not all of it, was not your fault. Nope. But what's the balance? But as an adult, you are responsible to figure it out, to learn from it, to heal from it, and to move beyond it.
Yeah.
And people get stuck in this pain is not my fault.
Right.
And so, but they have it takes a lot of courage, like your story, to take responsibility for what is there inside of our body.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe that there is an authority that we are given over ourselves. And, I was reading Job, and this won't take long.
Oh,
But
no
I was
worries.
reading the book of Job today. Literally, I've never read Job before.
It's an awesome story.
Oh, awesome story. And he could have been the biggest victim of all, right? And it's just so interesting to me because Job, he was never a victim, and he always gave praise to his God, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter what happened. But none of these things came from God. It was actually, when you read the book of Job, Satan did this to him. Satan can even give Job boils. He was covered in boils,
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the times we don't put that, we don't see it for what it really is. This is a huge spiritual battle for our souls. And when things like this happen to an individual, you have to get on top. You have to know your authority. Because if I don't know my authority,
you have to know your authority. What do you mean by that?
the authority that you've been given, your God-given authority over yourself.
Like you're in control.
Yes, you're very much in control.
And that was a pretty powerful turning point for you with that therapist, is realizing like, whoa, like I am in control of my experience.
Right. I had quit therapy, and then there were some things that I was still struggling with a little bit. And I saw this guy named Mike Simpson, and he does this amazing podcast. He did this amazing podcast called Rending the Veil of Fear. Okay. Because when you are going through therapy, you are constantly stuck in a state of fear. I'm afraid I'm a liar. I'm afraid of what happened to me. I'm afraid of my body. I'm afraid of illness. I'm afraid of all of these things. You're stuck in fear mode every single day, right?
It's like true suffering.
Yes. And you cannot be in a good place and be fearful at the same time. You can't. You have to choose. You have to choose one.
Yeah.
And I know how hard that is because I've been there, And I mean, this took me 7 years to figure out. But he was also he said the things that no other therapist would say to me, and that the hard things about what I did as a result of trauma, though, but that didn't matter. I chose to do it. And he told me the relationships that I had lost were my fault. And I was like, what on earth are you talking about?
Talking about these women that you became attached to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of your male therapists was like, hey, look, I got to shoot it to you straight. Like,
it was the first time I'd ever seen him.
You played a role in these relationships not working out.
He told me I sucked them dry until there was nothing left, and they left. And I think that was the hardest thing to learn. But I'll tell you what.
But there's some truth to it.
Oh, there was absolutely truth to it. And in fact, it was the truth that I was denying the whole time. No. I knew it was true. But I was afraid it was true because I didn't want to be like that. And so he really taught me about victimhood, and I had 6 sessions with him. 6. And he did hypnotherapy. And the last one, I knew I was done. I'm healed. I knew I was healed. I felt it. And in fact, I felt when he was doing this, I felt every cell in my body literally reset. It was amazing. I have it all on tape and everything. But I felt it within my cells. And I know that sounds so crazy, but it was inside and I could see it in my mind too. But he reset the very cells of my body and it was done. I knew it was done. It was incredible.
So I don't know if he did that.
No, it was God because
But you were in a space where you were open to that and you were ready.
Yeah.
Basically.
And he did use, a higher power. He used God in all of the things that he did, which was for me, because that's who I am. And I believe in that. It was incredible. It was incredible. But I really do think that we have the power within us to heal.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And
I think that it's not even outside of us. I think it's this. It's in here and it's this.
So for those that are maybe just listening, it's within us to heal, and then you pointed upwards. So what do you mean by that?
For me, it's Jesus Christ. If a God can hang on a cross and atone for every single thing that I felt, I must have worth, a lot of worth. A God. He sees little old me. And really, I think that without knowing my worth through the eyes of my God, I don't think there's much healing that can happen.
So that's pretty powerful. Just, kind of the narrative of what you're saying. Just another scripture in the Bible that really sticks out is we love him because he first loved us. And so part of this transformation for you, it sounds like, is you felt this worth and this love from something greater than yourself.
Right.
You felt it through the therapist. It sounds like maybe first, and then you started to feel that on your own, and maybe you even felt that from the male therapist that did hypnotherapy too. But what's interesting is that I think a really good way to view this, and I'm so curious of your thoughts on how I describe this, because I definitely want to get your thoughts on this. But if you view your soul, your internal self, if you view your soul as like a garden, and what pain does when we experience pain, it like digs out a hole in the garden. And then that hole is filled with pain and, like you said, darkness or suffering. That it's filled with pain and suffering. Now, step one is like, okay, I have to go through this process of like letting go of this pain. I have to like clear out the hole. But that's not enough to feel better. It has to then be filled or planted with something else. So what's really clear to me is it always, for some people, they just go through their own journey, but it takes longer. Like you said, 7 years or however long of going through this process of definitely feeling the pain, not just experiencing it. But I think you made these choices to actually move towards it and to let it be there.
Yeah.
And to feel it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm glad you said that, because I'm like, she might be the only person I've ever seen that is able to heal without feeling the pain.
Oh,
but
no, you
obviously,
have to.
Obviously, you did that.
Yeah, you have to feel the pain.
And then what it sounds like, so what then replaced? Okay, the hole is dug out. I felt like I have felt what I've needed to feel, like this abuse from my dad. I haven't maybe intentionally, you know, felt that and revisited that. And then what replaced that hole for you
So my dad, he passed away in March.
so recently?
Yeah. And I had not seen him since 2018. Not talked to him, nothing. And over Christmas, the Christmas before he passed away, I decided I was going to be brave. I'm going to do hard things. And I showed up at his room at the care center. And I brought Adam and my kids. And he couldn't see very well at that time. But we came in and I said, "Hi, Dad. It's Anna." And he goes, "Anna?" And he started crying. And he said, "There was only one thing left on my list that I needed to do before I died." And he said, "It was to see you." He's like, "I can die now." But we talked for a little bit. And then before I left, I sat down with him, held his hand. And I truly felt all of this. But I told him, "Dad, I forgive you. I forgive you for everything. And I hope that you can forgive me too." And he cried. I think these were the things that move us, that bring us to a higher level of life, of living, of wanting to be and do better. You know, did he ever say, "Oh, Anna, I'm sorry for this and this and this"? No. I could feel it.
Mm.
You know,
He didn't need to because you had already.
well, and I'd already let it go.
Yeah.
I didn't need that. Forgiveness is so powerful.
Anna, how did you let that go? Because that's the deepest pain that anyone can experience in their life.
It's because I love him. Love, the pure love of Christ, calms everything. It's the only peace that we can find is through becoming like him, succoring to him. And I think that in our own little ways, we can succor each other, you know?
Mm.
And I don't know what he's been through.
Mm.
I don't know what's on the other side of my own experiences. And so I really think that I've been blessed with the ability to really look outside of myself as well as learn to be accountable for myself.
That's really powerful.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. So this podcast is called The Emotional Blueprint because hearing this story, we want to try to find the blueprint of healing and the application for people on what they can do to heal and let go. If you can heal and let go of the deepest pain that can ever occur for a human being, then someone can heal from their abuse or their parents or their relation or their broken, life or relationships. And again, what's so valid about this is that you're a very emotional and sensitive person. So you know, some people go through the same trauma, but it just hits them deeper, or it doesn't hit them as much. So it's like, it's tough to
Right.
compare.
Yeah.
But the reason why we wanted to have you on the podcast is because you're a highly sensitive, highly emotional person that went through the most difficult thing. And so, um, what's really clear to me as we talk about this blueprint of healing is like, okay, you went through years of choosing to go toward and feel the pain that came there from your dad after you realized it was coming from him. And so that hole, because you voluntarily chose to go there and to feel it, that hole began to free up the pain and the suffering that filled that hole. But if we want it to, and if we seek it, I think this is kind of what you're saying. If we seek it, what inevitably fills that hole is love.
Right. And it's to a bigger degree of depth.
Totally. Well, if that depth is filled with pain, it's, I wouldn't say that depth doesn't count yet. It does, but it's just, there's a lot of fog. We just can't see things more for how they really, pain is like fog, internal fog.
Yeah.
It blinds our ability to see ourselves for who we are and other people. So, it's just such a beautiful story about before your dad died. It's like, because what I see, going back to the whole, like, how do I fully heal from this parent wound? So, by the way, most people enter adulthood with a parent wound. Now, that can be on a scale of like 1 to 50 or whatever. It's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
But your story is so cool, because what I've seen, and I'm just matching this up of what I've learned over the last, 10 years from people, is like, okay, phase 1 to heal from the parent wound, I have to start feeling the pain. Phase 2 is I have to start to see the gifts and the beauty that has come from this pain. And you did that. Again, that therapist, you started to do that naturally.
Yeah.
So I want to, and then so there's the third one. The third one then is, almost always involves having some kind of a conversation, like a healthy conversation with the parent, some kind of action in that way.
Yeah.
So I want to talk for a second about, like, how did you begin to find this beauty from this pain that came from your dad?
The first time that had ever been given to me, it was as an assignment, actually, by Michelle. And I wrote this 4-page, seriously, it was long, about all of the gifts that I had been given due to all of the pain that I had felt.
That's a good therapist.
I know, right? And what's interesting is we talked about God all the time.
And is this the one that committed suicide?
Yep.
I believe her. I believe that she is in you and around you in some way. Like, I think her. Yeah, I feel that.
Me too.
That's special.
Yep.
To know that you're honoring her and, like, her sacrifice. Yeah. Because she sacrificed a lot for you and many other people.
Yeah. And my other therapist, she sacrificed a lot too. It's, I think as a victim, you think, oh my gosh, another person who is throwing me away, another person who can't, I'm the worst, because I was told many times that I was the hardest client that they had ever had.
Yeah. I remember us talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Therapists, because I knew a couple of the therapists that have, and they wouldn't like judge you, but they would just like vent.
Yeah.
And like, oh, she's tough, or I don't know what to do with her.
Yeah. And I think as a highly sensitive person, You feel that. They don't have to say it. You
Exactly.
feel it. And when you're put in a box, I think we talked about this. When you're put in a box, it's very difficult to come out of that box and say, to be seen as someone who can come out of that box and be healed. And I mean, I think that there is a great idea of therapists having reunions with some of their clients because you really end like some of these were ended very abruptly, very badly. And for the rest of their lives, they're going to think, oh, that Anna, she was the most difficult. Oh boy, I bet she's like,
maybe they'll listen to this podcast. That's why we're doing this, is to show all these therapists that like, just kidding.
But to be a good therapist, and you're a great therapist, I know you are.
I've been searching for that validation this entire time.
Good. You just
now
got
we can
it.
end the podcast.
Okay, sweet.
This is all about me needing.
But I do think, you really have to have faith in your client. That, you know what? This looks real bad right now. This looks real bad, and I'm going to go home and cry about it. And I have not seen anything good out of this client for, however long. But I think if you're using the spirit and you don't give up.
You're talking about you or therapist?
Therapists.
Okay. I definitely want to talk about that. Let's come back to the whole, I would definitely want to ask you, because you saw how many therapists?
Oh my gosh. So
20?
many. Oh, probably at least. I mean, with Suncrest, yes.
20 total?
Oh yeah. And then the rest of my life. Yeah.
Over the span of 8 years?
No, probably less than that, but
around 7-ish, whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
7.
I've been seeing a therapist since 14, so many therapists.
I definitely want to come back to the whole because you're an expert on what makes a good therapist and what doesn't. But let's go back to talking about your dad for a second. So we were talking about the gifts so you wrote down this 4-page thing from your therapist, and it sounds like you started to see some of the beauty and some of the gifts that have come because your dad abused you. I think that's the key. Some people generalize it. They're like, oh, okay, I felt the pain. Now I need to think about what good has come.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But what gifts have come from my dad or my parents.
And it wasn't just my dad. It was my dad. I was abused by a brother. The guy in the park.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-husband, and I was date raped, and so all of these experiences, literally all of them brought me to who I am now. And you have to have that perspective.
What's interesting, yes, I couldn't agree more, is I see people try to find that perspective before they feel the pain. But remember, you can't, that's not going to do anything for you. I wouldn't say it's not going to do anything. It's not going to have that much value because that hole is filled with pain and suffering. That hole has to first be emptied.
Yes.
Then you can fill it with the truth.
Or you're going to start having a lot of autoimmune disorders, a lot of physical pain. If we don't deal with our trauma and our emotional pain, and because it's literally embedded in our cells.
Mm-hmm. That it's stored energy in our body. It affects our cell. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Cellular,
will come
that's
out elsewhere in your body
or outside of your body.
That's how we're reminded.
Mm-hmm.
Look, hey Anna, you're going bald. You better do something about that. You better look at something. And so I have been very blessed in the fact that my body tells me. And
because you're sensitive.
Right.
Yeah. It's cool you can look at that as a gift now, whereas I'm sure when you were going through all the pain, it felt like a curse.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I was in a wheelchair for a bit. Like if I went anywhere, I had to have somebody roll me around because I couldn't walk.
There's
So
this really cool Japanese word. I don't want to botch it. I wrote it down because it's a very powerful word. Here it is. It's called kamishitoi. Kamishitoi. It means in Japanese, it means like paper thin. So think of like a piece of paper. On one side is the pain and the suffering but then on the other side is the gifts.
yeah.
And it's paper thin.
Yeah.
And so kamishitoi is a symbol or a word that means like how important when the hole is cleared out, how important it is to see both sides.
Yeah.
Paper thin.
And you have to fill the hole.
Yep. So you chose love.
Yes.
And you God, and for some people, if it's another cool word that I love to describe this process for you is like the great softening. We have to feel pain to be softened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so think of like clay. If clay is really hard, it can't be molded.
Mm-hmm.
It's rigid. It is what it is. And this is the sad thing about what many people believe is this pain, they have let it harden them.
Yes.
And so they actually believe it's who they are.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
It is.
And I totally get it. It's like in the snapshot, it actually to some degree is because that clay is so hard. The answer is to start to get to a place where you can feel the pain and then the softening begins.
Mm-hmm.
The clay begins to get softened. It begins to get molded. And it really does turn into a beautiful sculpture of a tree. in my world. And yeah, I want to share one other thing on that, but any other thoughts on what we're talking about?
I don't think so.
Okay. So for you, the softening, God was a big part of that,
Yes.
or God was a big part of the molding for you. Now, for some people that don't believe in God or the universe, I want to share this because this is really beautiful. I was reading this in my Native American book, and it was talking about the Lakota tribe, and it says, but the old Lakota was wise. He knew that man's heart away from nature becomes hard. He knew that a lack of respect for growing, living things soon led to a lack of respect for humans too. So he kept his children close to nature's softening influence.
Yeah.
So nature is, I believe, the mom. In Christian terms, Heavenly Mother is her spirit, is, I believe, is nature.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be softened by mom or dad, Father Sky,
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, and there's maybe some other options too, but you choose what's going to work for you. And that seems to be a really necessary to find answers on what gifts have come, in this case, what gifts have come from the pain from my dad. That is a seeking activity. It has to come from a place of stillness and a spiritual avenue.
Yeah.
And so it's just so cool that just your story was so cool to remind us of that. So
thank you.
And then so phase 1, feel pain. Phase 2 is seeing kamishitoi, both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And then phase 3 is some kind of action. And what's beautiful is because you were being led by a spiritual force, you naturally just knew. You didn't have to go to therapists to know this. You naturally knew you needed to go talk to your dad. And I believe that a lot of the healing from your dad occurred after that experience.
Oh, absolutely.
And then maybe this experience with the therapist, with the hypnotherapy, was a kind of like almost a confirmation of like, it is done type of thing.
Yeah.
I'm curious your thought. I would love to get your.
So after my dad died, I was worried about his soul. And
Yeah.
And I went and I did a breath work. And I was pretty into breath work there for a bit. I mean, have you ever done breath work?
Love it.
Oh my gosh.
It's like a drug. It's like a natural drug.
Yes.
It's a natural
And
high.
you know, every time I would just sob and sob and sob. It's so amazing for trauma, like release from your body. And as I was doing breath work, I saw a waking vision. It was my dad. And he looked kind of in anguish, but God was there with him. And he said to me, "Don't you worry about him. I love him more than you ever could." And so, you know, like all of these beautiful experiences that each one of them in its own healed a small part of me, you know, and I really learned, because nurturing was a huge thing for me. I didn't get touch when I was little. The correct kind of touch.
In a healthy way, yeah.
And so, you know, with these mother figures, I searched and searched. They touch my back, or rub my back, or, you know, and it was everything. But then it was gone. It was unsustainable. And through all of this, I learned to come to my Heavenly Father, even for that. And I think with having experienced DID, I no longer struggle with that. It is healed in my brain. But I think it's left me with a very beautiful imagination, right? I think that is what it began with. As a little girl, you just use your brain differently. And I have been able to surround myself with hugs and loves and kisses and from God, you know, and it's so weird because it satisfies it, you know, and for long periods of time, it satisfies it.
Let's talk about that for a second. Because this is really beautiful.
Thank you.
So you talked about this experience where you see your dad. You have this spiritual experience where you see your dad and you see God next to him. And God says, "I love him more than you will ever know."
Yeah.
Or than you ever will.
Than I ever could.
Than I ever could. Yeah, thanks. And then you talk about receiving this like safety and this affection from God in this case. So I know that there's listeners out there that are going to say, like, she's just making this stuff up. She's just imagining this stuff. So my question is, how do you know that this is actually real?
Because it's satisfying.
Because of how you feel.
Right.
And this is an important message that we've talked a little bit about, But we cannot manufacture love and peace.
Nope.
So when
And trust me, I've been there. I've tried.
trust me, I've tried to do that.
I've tried.
So when it arrives on the scene, when you're having an experience like with seeing your dad and God, when it arrives in nature, when we're sitting next to the river and we have a question, that is the force. Those feelings literally mean that what's happening is real.
Mm-hmm.
That there's truth of what is taking place. That all emotions, anyways, I don't want to say, but that is now someone might say, well, I don't know. That's just like a opinion. How do I know that that's true? You have to experience it.
You have to experience it.
The challenge is start to put your trust in positive. I'm not talking about romantic love necessarily, but start putting your trust in peace and calm. Everyone, I know this to be true. Everyone in their life has had a moment when they have felt calm or peace or love or light. And that's usually how it manifests. So you have to try to remember the starting point.
Yes.
A starting point is I have to try to remember when I felt that. I have to, and I'm going to choose, just like your story. You're such a cool example of choosing to start to put your trust in that. And those feelings, those emotions. In Christianity, they call that the spirit. You started to put your trust in that, and then you just took off. You experienced like this complete healing.
Yeah.
So, so beautiful.
Thank you.
What you're saying in your story. Cool. I definitely have a couple final thoughts and questions. Anything else you wanted to mention though on what we're talking about?
I don't think so.
Okay. So yeah, give some people the dirt on therapists. So I've had a lot of exposure to working with a lot of different therapists. And the question I want to definitely ask you is, you're more the expert on this than me, I believe. What makes a good therapist and what makes a bad therapist? If someone needs a guide or a mentor, and that can be a therapist or anyone, but what makes a good guide and a good therapist compared to a bad one? Because you've seen the full range.
I think it is very hard because you know how many one session therapists I had where there is no easy way to find a good therapist. No easy way.
I agree with that.
For me, the reason that I chose after Suncrest, the therapist that I chose was because of one conversation that they had with me. And it brought me hope.
Mm.
And it made me think, but that conversation was very spiritual in nature. I think that now this is just my opinion, but I think that the way that therapists are trained now to not speak in any form or fashion spirit, I think
is a huge disservice to
it
people.
is because we are more spirit than we are human.
We're more spirit than we are
body. Yes.
So true.
And it's so necessary in healing. You cannot. Because
I agree.
those things,
I agree with that.
Like those things that happened, to me as a little girl. It was offensive to my body, but I'll tell you what, it was more offensive to my spirit.
It's a great way to put it.
And so that I don't know how to fix the therapeutic world, because I think that they are naturally trained to fix things on the lower level, on this low vibrating level, and it just doesn't work.
Well, so I've been through that training
I know
and
you
through the
have.
schooling, and there's so much fear at the academic level that they
Yeah.
put into therapists. Like, you better not bring up spiritual topics
Right.
or religious things and make someone feel uncomfortable. That is the worst thing you could do behind having sex with your client. Like, that
Right.
is literally the
Or maybe you're
message.
just going to find your people.
Well, it's so obtuse the way that they the way that they present it. And this is like pretty, from what I've heard, this was my experience, but I see this all the time in therapists. There's so much fear about that.
Yeah.
But it's like, in every first session I do with someone, I'm always like, hey, like, if you're really serious about your emotional rebirth and progress, it's like, there's often a huge overlap with spiritual
Right.
things. And so, like, tell me about what you feel comfortable with. Tell me what you believe. Tell me, like, that's really helpful for me to know. I'm never pushing an agenda when it comes to the spirituality thing, but to work within a framework that they feel comfortable in is like so key. And so I think that is a big thing for people to look for.
Right.
And so if you are looking for a guide, you first want to know, like, get in touch with, like, okay, what do I feel comfortable
Yeah.
with?
And what's the most important thing for you?
Yep.
You know, like for me, the most important thing was spiritual. You know, I
And
talk about God a lot.
it should be high on people's lists, is what we're saying. And
Yeah.
so, kind of know, and I guess what I was going to say, and I kind of cut you off too, sorry, is know what you feel comfortable with spiritually, and then find someone that is gonna be willing and good to talk with you about that and explore that and have that be a part
Right.
of your journey. Because without that for you and your story, you would not have been able to complete this, this
No.
process. So
Mm-mm.
cool. I think that's awesome. What was really insightful that I wanted to just wrap up with maybe is, it was so, I think it was so intriguing to me when we were talking about the impact of a parent wound has on relationships. And we already talked about that a little bit, how especially if there's been an emotional disconnect from the opposite sex parent, that almost always is going to affect patterns in dating relationships,
Right.
in intimate relationships.
Right.
And this isn't just if you're heterosexual, by the way. This is we see this across the board. So, what I think is just so insightful to bring up is that, just to use your story as an example, you were seeking this love and to be seen by a woman because you never got that from your own mom. And so the message, the deception, the deception of the pain says this. It says, hey, if you can just feel loved and seen by a woman, then you will experience healing.
Just because some things might still happen in your life that go wrong, it doesn't mean that you're not healed. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that
Right.
a lot of people think, oh, I'll never be healed of this. Oh, I'll never, but really we cannot control those around us. And we tend to think sometimes we can.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you really can't. And I think that with my hair loss, it kind of happened at the same time that I lost this friend. And I found out it's an autoimmune disorder, but when the cold months come, my hair falls out. And I'm sure that has symbolism somewhere in there, but
Oh, it does.
I'm sure it does.
We'll talk about that another time.
Right. But it's we are here always learning. If we are not learning something every day, something every week about ourselves, we're not living, and if hard things don't happen,
Well, like you
we're
said,
not living.
Like you said, if we're not doing that, we're not staying on top.
Right.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's great.
So,
let's talk more a little bit after this, but I just want to say something about your mom, because I think is that what the reason, again, the emotional blueprint is we feel like we know the phases and the steps that work, that are universal. So what's cool is the same way that you've been able to heal from your dad, we laid out like phase 1, feeling the pain fully, phase 2, recognizing the gifts that have come from that, phase 3, having a loving and honest conversation with your mom. It's the same.
Yes.
I've just had hundreds and hundreds, maybe more than that. I've just never seen this not work. And it's so important for me to always be open to like this, there could be some variation there for someone.
Yeah.
And, your story your story with your dad just validates this blueprint. And so what's cool is, we can talk more, but you obviously really deserve to fully heal from your mom too.
Oh, and it's not my mom. Because my mom was just a representation. She never did anything wrong. She just didn't even know.
Right.
And so what you said about, the conversation, that number 3, I think that is the hardest part, because like I said, you can't control someone to give you a conversation. And when you ask for a conversation and it's denied over and over again, sometimes it's harder to heal,
Right. Yeah.
So,
we should talk about that another time for sure.
Yep.
So, let's maybe wrap up with this. So the question is kind of going back to, what can I do to minimize the damage in my relationships if I'm noticing an unhealthy pattern? Okay, so kind of what I was explaining a little bit earlier was that this emotional deception of, if I could just get the love that I from this woman or from this man, then the emotional deception is, if I can just get this love, then I will be healed. It'll be like this completion of what's always been incomplete. Okay, that is the emotional deception.
It is,
okay?
And it never works.
So, right. And so what's so interesting is I've seen that actually play out. I've seen somebody seek that, and they actually, okay, so now the difficulty of this is we're emotionally drawn to what we are comfortable with. So if I had an unhealthy relationship with my mom growing up, which I did, then I was drawn to women that were emotionally like her.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm already off to a bad start.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the emotional deception kicks in. If you can just get this woman to change and to love you, then you will be complete.
Right.
Okay. So now that rarely happens, if ever happens, but I've actually seen it happen. I've actually seen it happen where somebody marries or starts dating somebody that is emotionally unhealthy, just like their parent wound. But then this person goes through this transformation and actually changes. And because this becomes this loving, amazing human being, and is able to then give this person everything that they've wanted and needed. But guess what? What can replace the love that you never got from your mom or dad between the ages of 0 and 18? What can replace that? The answer is nothing
Nothing.
and no one.
And you can't go back.
And you can't go back. Exactly. So that's why this healing process is so vital. You have to dig out the hole. You have to plant a nice little tree in there. You have to, I wouldn't say there's no other way, but it is the way that we know works.
Yeah.
And your story was such a beautiful validation of that. So any final thoughts, Miss Anna, or questions?
No, just thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
If you have benefited from this podcast in any way, it would mean the world to us to have you subscribe, to allow us to keep it going and bring on inspirational human beings.